Crap. All right, there we go. Yeah, here we are. There we are. Okay. Welcome to the movie Western Star Movie Podcast. It's HJW back again, and we got a lot to talk about. This is a third to last podcast. It's going to be on the on this year. And then we're gonna have to wait until this fall to do these. So it's going to be a little bit unfortunate, but this has been a great the second year doing this, second time doing this. It's been great. Um, so we got a lot to talk about. We got three films to review, and we got three topics to talk about, and to figure out our opinions or not, and just to make sure that we're all hopefully having a good time. If you're new, welcome. Also, hit the like button. I got 2 likes on the last one, which was shockingly amazing. Um, and the views, it's always good to see people who watch these supporting them and all that kind of stuff. So let's get into it with the big movie, the main movie that came out this weekend, which is not Mario Brothers because Mario Brothers did come out last week and crushed in the box office. I'm talking about Renfield. Renfield was directed by Chris McKay and stars Nicholas Hoult and Nicolas Cage and Aquafina, and is pretty much a newer telling of the Dracula concept. Basically, there's Dracula, and he wants Renfield to give him people and kill them so he can eat them and grow to full power. And all the while, he thinks like maybe this is not the right time to do it. Maybe this is like a little bit of a different phase in my life, and I just want to be a normal person. And so he kind of meets Aquafina's character, who's a cop, and they get into a lot of entanglements with each other. This film was looked very interesting. I knew this was going for comedy, and the first trailer was really good. I think the second trailer was just a little bit less good than it was not as good as the second trailer. Um, and the film was exciting. I mean, the first trailer was like 45 million views on it, which is incredible. So obviously, there's a lot of debate going around as to how do you view this movie? Is it a comedy? Is it a horror film? It's not a horror film, although there's elements that make it horror, but it's not really a horror film. Now, Chris McKay is actually a really good director. He made the Lego Batman movie, which is really really good, and he made the Tomorrow War on Amazon Prime Video, which is a really underrated film. And this is his third time. This is his third time directing and his second time in live action. And there's parts of this movie I really did enjoy. I think like half of this movie I thought was really good, and then the other half of the film I didn't like. Let's talk about the first half of the film. Clearly, Nicolas Cage is having a fantastic job. He's doing the best he can. I think he is a fantastic actor. He does everything he needs to do, which makes so much sense because it's kind of an over the top Dracula. He's very good in this movie, and it reminds me like the classic Nicolas Cage. Nicholas Holt is really good as well. He plays Renfield, and he has been given this immortality to survive with Dracula and do all the things he needs to do. He's kind of in a therapy group where he goes to these people and says like these things where it's like I am worthy. I want power, and it's good. Aquafina is good in the movie. I think the performances for the most part are actually really good. The film is paced very well. It's an hour and 33 minutes, which is very quick for a film, and I did enjoy that. I think that some of the action sequences are really nice, and they offer a lot of graphicness. There's a lot of brutality in this film, which is something I didn't expect. There's a lot of brutal deaths, a lot of blood, and if that's what you're in for, perfectly. Um, I think that the movie's comedy worked. It worked for me. There was a lot of times I laughed. A lot of times I didn't. Sometimes it did. Sometimes it didn't do it for me. But overall, I had a really good time with that half of the film. And I would say the first half of this movie is really where it's at. The second half, it's like somebody directed a completely different film. and I have no idea what happened because the second half of this film introduces a new subplot that comes out of nowhere, and I'm like, this is what the movie's going to be now, because it's literally what the main topic is. The second half of this movie changes the plot twist or the tone of the film. And as soon as that happens, the rest of this film is like that. And of course, Dracula's there too. It's this corrupt police thing that happens, which I don't know if that's a spoiler or not, but that's like a thing that happens in the film because Aquafina's character is like, I'm not as well as I'm not like, getting the treatment I can because there's this mob boss played by Ben Schwartz, and I didn't buy him. I didn't buy him as a mob boss. I thought he was really over the top. Sometimes some of the line delivery was awkward. His mother, I don't know if it's the voice or anything, but it sounded weird. But she she tries to capture Ben Schwartz's character, who's a mob boss, and obviously it doesn't go right. And every time he's let go, and the police is like, "Well, we can't do anything about it." So um, that's the thing, which is frustrating to me because they really have two movies in one. They have the vampire part with Dracula and Nicholas Hoult trying to come out of his shell and be like, I want to do my own thing. Like I want to do this. And then you have the other part of the film where it's just like this whole cop thing that's woven into the Dracula storyline, and it just didn't feel right. It really felt like two people were directing a movie, and two of the storylines just didn't mash up together. Also, the CGI blood is really not that good. I don't expect it from a $65 million budgeted film, but there's a scene where Nicholas Hoult kicks a guy and he's holding his arms, and he like kicks him and his arms fall off. And the CGI blood that's like pouring out of his arms, it looked super fake. And I just don't understand. Like they could have done makeup, like just put a little bit of blood on there, like wet blood. That's it. But it's all this CGI blood. Some of the gore looks great, but some of it really does look really bad in that sense. So there's part of me that thinks that this movie is worth checking out. I think that the first half of this movie is actually probably the best part of the film. Nicolas Cage, Nicholas Hoult, all the actors except for Ben Schwartz, I bought into what they were doing. The second half of this movie really blows. It really tanks the movie into a completely different film. Yes, there's Dracula in it, but it's like now he's woven into this whole crime thing, and it just felt weird. This is easily Chris McKay's weakest film, in my opinion, but I don't dislike it. I had a good time. I had a okay time watching it. We'll talk about the performance at the box office, at the end of this podcast. But yeah, it just didn't work for me. I'm gonna give Renfield a C plus. I think there's parts of this film that work, but overall, you can't deny the fact that this movie is two completely different films, and I'm not buying it. So that's Renfield. Next up, I saw Air. Now, this movie was directed by Ben Affleck, and it stars Matt Damon, Ben Affleck himself, Chris Messina, Chris Tucker, Marlon Wayans, Viola Davis, and Jason Bateman. And it's pretty much the story of how Nike created Air Jordans and how he got Michael Jordan to sign a deal with Nike, and it would become one of the top selling shoes of all time. And Ben Affleck is a great director. I have seen his movie Argo, which is really good, and I like the cast of this movie. I mean, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. That's pretty much a win-win situation for me. I mean, I didn't see The Last Duel at all yet, um, and so I don't know about that movie. It's not directed by Ben Affleck. It's directed by Ridley Scott, and it actually was really good, but it flopped super hard at the box office because it was in the middle of like the fall 2021 pandemic. Plus, it was opening on Halloween Kills. So, what were you going to do? And this movie was very interesting. I thought it looked good. I didn't know if this would have been an Oscar contender because I think that there's a lot more other films coming out later on in the fall that will be Oscar bait movies. But this better be one of them because this movie's amazing. I really enjoyed Air. And I would have seen it last weekend, but a lot of things happened, or I don't know. I didn't see it Friday. I didn't see it Saturday. I didn't see it Sunday. I don't know. I didn't see it Monday, which is surprising. I could have seen it then. But this movie is fantastic. It's easily one of my favorite films of the year because it is a perfect drama about how this specific shoe was made. I was invested the entire time. I was never bored. I never wanted to fall asleep. It worked for me. A film like this can go either two ways. One, it can be very, very boring, or two, it can be really, really investing because you care about what happens. The performances are incredible. I mean, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, of course, are great in everything. Chris Tucker is something that I was really interested about. He is really good in the film, and if you've seen his other movies like Rush Hour, he's kind of like over the top. He's actually really good in this movie. Probably the best performance he's ever done. Marlon Wayans is really good in this movie for like this couple of one scene that he's in. But Viola Davis, and I've said this when I reviewed The Woman King, or when I talked about The Woman King, I talked about like how good it was as a film. She is amazing in this movie as Michael Jordan's mom. And the thing that's interesting is that they don't show who Michael Jordan looks like in this movie, because obviously Michael Jordan's like what 50 years old, so this was like in 1984. So obviously you're going to have a younger Michael Jordan, and he's like really really tall. So how are you going to have a younger version of him? You can't de-age him or anything because he's really big. He's bigger than his parents, and so they have a normal person playing him, and you don't see his face, but you see the conversations that he has with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck and all these other friends. And I thought that was good. Jason Bateman's also really done the movie. I think the performances are incredible. The film cinematography is superb. It's really well. It was shot on like wide, I think 1.8151 ratio, so it like fills up the entirety of the screen. It's not IMAX ratio, which is weird because there's like two versions, like one like 1.9 IMAX ratio, then there's like 1.43, and then there's 1.85, which I just don't understand why that is the case. Nonetheless, it's great. I really did enjoy the story of how they were able to do it because at the beginning of the film, um, you know, we see that Matt Damon's in a little bit of a weird spot, and he needs to make the deal quickly. He needs to sign a new player. This is during the draft when Michael Jordan was drafted, Charles Barkley was drafted, and John Stockton was drafted. And so there's all these things that you're like, oh, I referenced that. I know, I understand that. I understand that one. And so like it's really difficult, for Matt Damon to really figure it out. And he really wants to sign Michael Jordan to this deal, but everybody's like, nobody's gonna get Michael Jordan. You kidding me? Strangely enough, they got Michael Jordan. The writing in this movie is actually really good. I think the writing in this movie is really interesting. It's funny. It's a very funny movie filled with really good jokes. Um, and it keeps you invested. There's a hilarious scene involving Chris Messina and Matt Damon on a phone call, and they're like arguing with each other. And Chris Messina's acting in this scene is really like he's like agitated, but he's really funny in the movie. And so I think that there's a lot of elements in this film that worked for me. I would say the one thing that I just was like, is that the movie kind of ends, but then it keeps going a little bit towards the end of the film. And I do have the cliche where it's like, oh, this is what happened. Air Jordan became the most successful thing ever. This guy went out of business. This guy became one of the biggest rich billionaires of all. It shows you like, oh, history lesson, by the way. And so that's a cliche, but also the movie kind of doesn't end right away. It like ends like there, and then there's like another scene, and then it ends. So I was just like a little bit disappointed. Um, but I really like this movie. I really love this movie. This is actually one of my favorite films of the year. It's so good, and I'm shocked that I actually enjoyed it as much as I did because I was expecting this to be a fun movie. but it actually worked. And I'm really going to be not surprised if Ben Affleck gets nominated for this movie during the during Oscar season, because this is a really good film. Overall, I give Air an A. I think this is a fantastic film. It's not quite the best movie of the year yet. John Wick Chapter 4, I think, is superb in every single way, but that's a completely different movie. So check out Air in theaters right now. It's still playing. Hopefully, some of you see it. Next up, we have Tetris, the newest Apple TV Plus film, and this is a little bit of a different film than Air. This time around, it's the development of Tetris and how it got popular in certain areas of Russia and China. Pretty much, Taron Egerton plays this businessman, and there's all these other companies that are trying to buy Tetris and the gaming rights and the console rights. And there's a place in Russia where they have it, and so he flies to Russia to pretty much gain the trust of the Russian people, I would say, the supremacy or whatever, in hopes of gaining the rights to test Tetris and all these other different companies and people. And this was good. I didn't think this was a game changing drama. Obviously, this is based off of true events. Um, so there's the first of all, the acting is really good. I think from everybody, and I barely recognize anybody in here other than Taron Egerton. He's really good in the film. He plays like this guy who really wants Tetris to be a part of the world because it's one of the most addicting games known to man. And so he wants everybody to have this game in every state. So he flies to Russia and things are going on there, State of the Union or Union, State Union, whatever it is happening there. So a lot of shadiness. But I thought it was well done. The performances are really good in the film. Also, the cinematography is is good to appall, and it was actually invested. I was never bored. I never wanted to be like, hold on, I'm gonna go to the bathroom. Well, I did pee once, but I was never like, ugh, I'm bored. I would say for the first 20 minutes, I was like, this isn't hitting for me. But I think when they start to go to Russia and they have more of a relationship with the people trying to negotiate with them, I think the film considerably picks up. And I think it's a much better movie after that point. Because the first 20 minutes of this movie are a lot of setup and a lot of explaining, and there's a lot of flashbacking. And that could be tropes. That's really tropey to have a flashback in this movie. But I think it worked pretty well. Um, I would say my other biggest problem with the movie is that its pacing is really off. I was watching the film. It is an hour and 58 minutes, and it felt a little bit longer than 2 hours, which was surprising to me because John Wick Chapter 4 was 2 hours and 49 minutes, and that movie it felt long, but it wasn't as long to me. You know, this movie felt like it was 2 hours and 15 or 10 minutes, which I felt was a little bit too much. Again, with these biopics, there's all this like information that you want to include, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And so like I'm not going to say like, oh, all this stuff needs to be taken out. There's some unnecessary scenes in this movie, and I couldn't really tell who was working for who at one point because apparently there's another company that tries to buy the rights that's kind of helping Taron Egerton's character out. And I got confused at a point, and I was really confused halfway through, but I was still invested. And then the latter half of the film, it explained it properly. This is based off of true events, and I'm not lying. If you want to watch the movie, it's on Apple TV Plus. If you have an account, it's free. This is based off of real events, so that's interesting. Also, a thing that didn't work for me was I felt like that there wasn't as much of an emotion. You know, Taron Egerton has a daughter who has this recital planned up, and he really wants to go to this recital, but he can't. And so there's no real like connection there. I felt the emotion didn't hit because it's then the scene is after the scene, it's the whole business operations going down in Russia. And so it waits for the emotion to get in. And then the movie ends with him connecting with his daughter and watching the performance. So it takes a while for the emotion to really set back right. And I just felt like that they could have done that better. They definitely could have done that better. But without a doubt, um, this is a fine movie. It's definitely good, and I don't think this is a game changer. I just think it's okay. So it was a short review for that one because I don't think I have really a lot to talk about. It was an entertaining film. I was impressed with what they were doing, and a lot of those Tetris references and stuff really got me. So I actually enjoyed it. I'm gonna give Tetris a B. I think it's a fair score, and that's all I want to talk about. So that's really it for the reviews. Let's get on to the actual different topics that we have. All three of the topics that we're here to talk about. First things first is that the new Little Mermaid 2023 film is officially coming in about 4 weeks, which is really interesting. That's one of my most anticipated films of the year. It's in my top three easily because of nostalgia and because I am a supporter of what they're doing with this film. Now, the runtime was recently revealed, and it is 2 hours and 15 minutes long. Now, that's a little bit interesting because the original film, the original animation, is about 88 minutes long. But when I was a kid, I always thought that the movie was like way too long, like 2 hours. This movie is actually 2 hours and 15 minutes long. And I think what Rob Marshall is doing is he's adding more to the story. He's not just doing a copy and paste film based off of the original. He's actually making new things, and I think that's going to work out. That being said, it gets me nervous because the original Pinocchio was like 88 minutes long, and the newest one was almost 2 hours, and that movie stinks. So I'm interested. I think that everything I have seen about this film looks incredible. I really have hope that The Little Mermaid is going to be a big hit with a lot of people. And again, I am somebody who is supporting this movie. I am nostalgic for the original film. It's easily one of the best animated films from Disney ever. And I am a supporter for Haley Bailey and her performance because she sings beautifully. And her acting is actually really good from what we've seen so far. And obviously, Javier Bardem as King Trident is really good because he's such a great actor. Melissa McCarthy, I got to see what she does as Ursula. So far, what I've seen is she does a really good job with the cackle. The thing that bugs me, though, when I watched the newest trailer was the CGI for the animals. I really don't understand why the CGI or the actual look for the flounder and Sebastian look like a literal crab and a fish, but their mouths are moving. Same with the Sebastian character. He has these eyes right here and his mouth's moving like this. It's not like a moving mouth. Now, obviously it's you can't make an exact copy of Sebastian the way he looked in the original animation film and put that into live action. You just can't do that. But it would be nice if they moved the lips around because the thing I hated about the Lion King movie, which say all you want, I did not like that film and I was broken because I actually played the Lion King jingle at my graduation. I was on the drum set and I went through all the songs. The problem with that one was that the emotions of the lions didn't work. They were just very straight because apparently they wanted to go for a realistic vibe. However, The Jungle Book was a less cheaper film. They're both big budget movies, but the Jungle Book remake was a less cheaper film, and even that movie had facial emotions on the animals. So I don't understand why some of these newer films aren't doing that. The one thing that Pinocchio did was actually do that. Stingy Jack, the live action version of Stingy Jack, actually had the moving face. So I don't understand why some of these movies are like, "Yeah, we want to be realistic." No, we don't. It matters because they don't show emotion. Again, I have to see the movie for myself. I'm really praying for the film to be good. Don't get my hopes up. That's a really big risk I'm willing to take. Again, comes out May 26th. I am definitely getting my tickets if when they go on sale. Next up, Speaking of tickets, I bought my tickets for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I always buy my Marvel tickets the day the tickets are announced because I don't want to be that last sore loser that's like, you didn't get your tickets on time and then I have to see it the next day and people are posting about it, spoilers and stuff. I don't like it. That's why I always go opening day. If there's an advanced screening, I go there. And Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, to many people, is projected to be the biggest movie of the year. Now, so far from what Mario's been doing, I don't think that's the case. But the tracking for the box office has just come out recently. And Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is either going to beat Mario or it's going to be stepped on by Mario because the box office tracking has this movie opening around 125 to 155 million dollars. That's actually a pretty good estimate. The problem is the last movie, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, opened with $146 million compared to the first Guardians, which opened to $93 million. So as you can see, there was a trajectory that went up, even though Guardians 2 was not as good as Guardians 1. That being said, this is James Gunn's final Guardians movie, and I expected the numbers to be a little bit higher, like 150 to 170. Because I think that if this movie is good, the numbers will be skyrocketing to possibly 170 because these Guardians were something that nobody knew who they were. Nobody was like, "Oh, Guardians of the Galaxy, what's that?" It blows my mind to think that this is some of the that Guardians of the Galaxy 1 is one of the best Marvel movies ever. It was a ragtag team of nobodies that nobody knew who these people were, and at the very moment it made a lot of money and it was really freaking good. Guardians 2 was not as good as the first one. In fact, I don't think it's as good as some of the other Marvel movies, and it made even more money. So, with what happened with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, where the movie was it opened to $100 million and then it skyrocketed down for one of the biggest MCU second weekend drops of all time, it concerns me that Guardians might have that if the movie isn't as good. Because that's what happened with Shazam. Shazam was not a good movie and it skyrocketed really badly. And now the movie is one of the biggest superhero box office bombs ever. This cannot happen with Marvel. The Marvels really needs to not do that because I really enjoyed the trailer. And apparently, what I've seen is people don't like the trailer. They're disliking it, which makes no sense. Because again, wouldn't you want to support this movie? I mean, the last Captain Marvel movie made $1 billion. I don't know why these people are disliking it. Maybe it's because misogynists are out there and they just don't know. You have to see the movie for yourself. And again, with Guardians 3, I am confident that James Gunn is going to deliver a satisfying conclusion. And it's going to be very emotional and it's going to set up yet another probably story arc for some of these characters. Now, apparently, this is the last Guardians movie, so we don't know if these characters are going to live or die. And it's very interesting. And I'm really interested to see how much money this movie is going to make. I think it's going to make a lot of money. I think next weekend, I think that's where they're going to do the premiere of the film. And if reviews come out and the Rotten Tomatoes score is really good, people are going to flock to this thing. They're going to flock to see it because it's the end of the Guardians. And you want to see how their story comes to an end. Face the music one last time. You know, it gets you emotional. And that's what I got with the trailers. The trailers have been incredible. So I'm really concerned that Guardians 3 might not make more opening weekend than Guardians 2, which opened again to $146 million. So there's that. Speaking of $146 million, that's what Super Mario Bros. Did in its opening weekend and 204 on its 5-day weekend. So heading into the second weekend, they were expecting a 50 to 60% drop. Now, early tracking said this movie was going to make like 58 million plus. Then they said, oh, it's making 72 million plus. And then on Sunday, they said, oh no, it officially made 87 million plus. On Monday, they finally updated it. It made $92 million, which, as of right now, is the record for the biggest second weekend opening of a movie that opened over $100 million. Last year it was Top Gun Maverick. The year before Top Gun Maverick, it was Shrek 2. That came out years ago. And the reason why I think that's happening is because they're taking their kids to see it over and over again. People are going to see it over and over again because of nostalgia. This is a perfect film, and I think this movie is going to do even better. Well, not by much, but I think this is going to be another big hit in the third weekend. Because really, the only movie you have going up against that is Evil Dead Rise. And that movie is projected to make in the mid 13 to $20 million range. I must abbreviate. I'm really excited for Evil Dead, so I hope more people support it because it has a 96% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, which that means it's really good. And so Mario took a 36% drop. Now, whether you make a 40 to 50 range, you know your movie did really well. In between 50 to 60, okay. Anything beyond 60, you're like, okay, that's a little bit weird because people already seen it. And, that's really bad. But less than 40% is incredible. It's incredible. And you can tell your movie's going to make more money because this thing's already at $700 million in its second week, which is insane. But the real problem here is that we have Renfield, a movie that had 45 million views on the first damn trailer that actually tanked. And when I say tanked, I mean it effing tanked. It made like $8 million on its opening weekend, which is really bad considering the fact that this is a $65 million budget film and worldwide, $10 million. Now you think like, oh, that's actually domestically, right? No, that's 8 million in the United States and 2 million internationally. Did they not market this movie in any other territory? Because that's the biggest problem. You want these other territories, not just in the United States, to watch your movie and be like, that's fascinating. Super Mario Brothers is doing it. Avatar, The Way of Water did it. It made like $1 billion overseas. Wouldn't you want your movie to expand? It just blows my mind that this movie actually tanked. Because the movie made 45 million views on the first trailer and 20 million views on the second. Maybe people were like, we're just going to take our kids to see Mario. It's okay. But wouldn't you want to see a movie about Nicolas Cage who's a vampire? That's amazing. But apparently this movie is going to bomb badly. And it's going to really hurt Universal. Especially when Cocaine Bear actually did really well and Knocked at the Cabin. Movies that have low budgets and didn't make as much money. I think Knocked at the Cabin made like 54 million worldwide. Cocaine Bear made like 88. But they made a profit because they made more than their budget, triple or quadruple their budget. So I don't understand why this movie all of a sudden can't do that. It's difficult now where we are with box office because films have to really kick with audiences, either if it's a franchise and if the movie's really good, then that happens. Which is so sad to say that what Dungeons and Dragons has done is not impressive. The movie has a budget of 150 million. Way before the film came out, there were so many test screenings and advanced early access showings that everybody said, "Oh yeah, go see this movie." I even said, "Go see Dungeons and Dragons." The movie's made 157 million worldwide at this point. That's like 7 million more than a budget. By the end of the month, I don't know if this movie will even make it to 200, which is even worse now because we might not get another film. Because Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves was a great movie. And it blows my mind. It blows my mind. Also, we have Shazam, Fear of the Gods. That movie stunk at the box office because DC's in a bad spot. They're in a really bad spot. But back to Super Mario Bros. And Renfield. When I went to see Renfield, there was barely a lot of people. I mean, there was some people in the theater in front. There was barely anybody sitting in the back of us. There was more up in the front. I went to the Portchester Theater, so normally they do have seats open, but for the most part, if it's a really big film, they go to that movie instead. So Apparently, this wasn't the biggest film that opened this weekend. Apparently, The Pope's Exorcist did. And I haven't seen The Pope's Exorcist yet, which is shocking. Apparently, that movie made more than Renfield and has already made a profit over its budget. It made 37 million worldwide against its $18 million budget, which is even worse now because we have a film that stars Nicolas Cage, who's Dracula, versus Russell Crowe, who's a Pope's exorcist, or who's an exorcist and Pope or whatever. And it made more than that because the movie's making well overseas, which blows my mind. It's going to be really difficult for movies to really get back to where they are, especially films that you think are going to be hits and or end up being surprise hits, or movies that are just not good that bomb, because you know, it's interesting. It's really weird to see how these movies really perform in the theater versus streaming. We're finally back to the box office being normal. And what blows my mind is we're still not at that level. I mean, we are at that level. Avatar made $2 billion, so we're fine. But we need more people to go see these movies in the theater, and that's what really works. And honestly, that's really all I have to say for this podcast. This was a really short one, and it's shocking. But I think that's gonna do it. I think it's gonna do it for the podcast. I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in. Look forward next weekend. That'll be my second to last show, and then on May 3rd, that'll be my final show of the year, and then you'll wait till September. But I might do something. I might announce something in the next 2 weeks of what I'll do. If you want to see more of the Western Star Movie Podcast. So with that said, thank you so much for tuning in. This has been the HAW Western Star Movie Podcast. Signing off.